Good evening, or rather, good morning. It is now very early in the morning on Saturday, the 28th of January, 2023. So, January is almost in the books. It's Gordon Causey. Once again, if you haven't watched my channel before, uh, I use the handle Gordy Canuck on Twitter. On Reddit, my handle is Grow a Set. Had them for years, I think going back 10 plus years. Wanted to just do a quick video about what's being talked about, what's dominating conversation, what's dominating the social media sphere. And right now, it's this Project Veritas video with this guy, Jordon Trishton Walker, who's purportedly an executive of some description or a director of some description with Pfizer, and dropping the bombshell news that Pfizer is supposedly, at least according to this Walker guy, engaged in or planning to be engaged in the mutating of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And it strikes me they've come out with now another video since the first one dropped. There's a second one that drops where where the guy who heads up this Project Veritas has confronted this Walker character, and so we get, they're releasing this in little snippets. It all appears to have happened at once, but they've edited it and have released one big chunk with commentary in between. And now the second video is dropped, and it's this confrontation with this kid Walker going absolutely crazy, saying that it was a date and that he was lying to impress his date. And goodness knows what's going on. If you go onto Google and if you just search out Jordon, spelled Jordon, Trishton, Trishton, Walker, Walker. If you search it out, it'll say that it appears that this story is evolving and that the results are changing rapidly. It's sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the room. There's so much going on in the world right now, but there's so much fixation on this salacious little story of directed evolution and everything else. And quite honestly, my inclination is to view it as being something of a distraction. It's the old sleight of hand, misdirection, look over here so you're not paying attention to what's going on, what's going on everywhere else. I mean, we'll see what comes out of it at the end of the day, but there's so many other things happening, and all the fixation is on this. I mean, this whole idea of directed evolution, gain of function research, that came out during senatorial hearings with Senator Rand Paul, who's a medical doctor, got his medical degree, I believe, from Duke University, and then he later went on to specialize, I believe, in ophthalmology. So he's at least able to, he's got the requisite background to take Dr. Anthony Fauci to task and battle him toe to toe. It's at least something of a level playing field. But this whole idea that of labs, be they with Pfizer, or be they in Wuhan, China, or even Canada's own microbiology lab in Winnipeg, Manitoba, are these labs engaging in fiddling around with viral life forms? Not a disclaimer I always should throw out right at the beginning. Nothing in this video, nothing in any of my videos is ever meant to be construed as medical advice. These are just the thoughts, views, opinions of one individual. a guy up in Canada, a guy up in southeastern Ontario, Canada. But, the Chicago Bears t-shirt, which I would never buy, but it was given to me free. So the price was right. It appeals to my Scottish background. But leaving aside this Trishton Walker character, I expect there to be some fallout from that. I imagine if everything presented is true, his career with Pfizer and probably in that entire industry is down the toilet. And is it going to move the needle in terms of anything? Or people who rely strictly on the mainstream, who rely on the nightly news for their information, are they going to be moved in any tangible way? I highly doubt it. I don't think it'll get anyone to change an opinion. It solidifies the opinions of those who look upon this great reset, fourth industrial revolution, and everything else. And those who dare to stick the word plan in front of demic, that it'll simply make their opinions, which were unshakable anyway, more unshakable. But it's not going to bring anyone over from the other side. But I mean, just touch on quickly some of the things I think we should be worried about. One is this 15-minute city. This idea, the city of Edmonton, Alberta. I did an earlier video. I moved Edmonton to Ontario. I said Edmonton, Ontario. No, Edmonton, Alberta. Edmonton is and Edmonton, their city planning department. It's available from their own, from the city's own website. Their planning department is actively engaging in this idea of 15-minute cities, this idea of restricting the movement of individuals to within a 15-minute radius. So to either eliminate or greatly reduce the need for cars and the whole bit about carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I find it mind-blowingly frustrating that for every cubic megaton or whatever the measurement is, for every unit of carbon that countries like Canada and the United States reduce, China, their economy is going gangbusters, and they keep bringing on more and more coal-fired plants online. So the end result is more carbon in the atmosphere. And again, non-expert, not advice, not contending to be an expert, but as far as I'm aware, carbon is plant food. And I think human beings, that we're something like 90% carbon. You can check on that. Sounds like I have someone getting up early. My little guy. I may end this early. What else? The move away from cash, moving towards this digital currency, cashless society should be a concern for everyone, because it's just another way to track everything you do. Every commercial transaction, every transaction you're engaged in, there'll be a digital record of it. The idea of individual liberty and autonomy can track every penny. And in Canada, we've eliminated the physical penny. There are no more pennies in circulation. There are digital pennies still exist. If you go and you pay with a card or with your phone or with whatever, and if the total is $5.18 and you swipe or flash your phone, it's $5.18. So the penny still exists as a unit, but no longer as a physical unit. And are we going to see the same thing happen with nickels, dimes, quarters, dollars, and up, where there's no more physical currency? And that, to me, should be concerning. But I don't think, especially with the younger population who have grown up with this idea of paying with cards and paying with their phone, I wonder how much resistance there will be to it, if any. If you're a Canadian, and especially if you're a Canadian hunter, you should be aware of the fact that they've brought in legislation in Canada, and I'm not exactly sure where it is in the legislative process, if it's past Parliament and then it's before the Senate, or if it's received royal assent or not. But there's a move toward restricting gun ownership. And the government, the official line is that the government is not going after hunting rifles. But from everything I've read, the legislation actually includes the way, because you have to describe an actual weapon, its action, how many rounds it can handle at a single time, except, all these different parameters. And it seems to include just about all the major and most popular hunting rifles on the market. So once it's codified in law, then all I have to do is make a declaration. Anyone holding a firearm that heretofore had been perfectly legal can now be in violation of a law. And Americans, our friends to the south, have something called the Second Amendment, which was written into the U.S. Constitution, as far as I know. The reason behind the Second Amendment was, and I don't have the verbiage in front of me, and I don't remember it word for word, but it has something to do with in order to maintain a well-regulated militia. And the reason the Second Amendment was written into the U.S. Constitution, remember we're talking about the 1770s, 80s, 90s, is because the American Revolution was a very recent event, and there was still the concern in the former U.S. colonies and the former colonies, the newly founded United States of America, that Britain might come back, that Britain might try and retake their rebellious colonies. And so, but having written that in, that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, ensures Americans of the right, has 200 plus years later, 250 odd years later, Americans still have the right to bear arms. In some states, you're allowed to have open carry, meaning you can have it open and on display. It was an eye-opener for me back in probably 2016, I think it was. I was down in Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area of Virginia, and at a basketball tournament, and they actually had a sign, and they had security guards checking, because at that location, you weren't allowed to bring firearms inside. It was definitely something of a culture shock for a Canadian. So the whole issue of gun control, and of course bodily autonomy, should be the right of an individual to decline any type of medical treatment. As I understand it, that is a pillar of something called the Nuremberg Code that came out of the Nuremberg trials after the end of World War II, is the right to bodily autonomy and the right to refuse any type of medical intervention or treatment. And that obviously would include the obvious. And but now, we've seen so many people throw that under the bus out of fear. They're so afraid of contracting the deadly coronavirus that this concept of bodily autonomy gets thrown out the window. And another thing that just recently came out within the last 2 weeks is that the FDA and CDC, two government bodies in the United States that have been heavily pushing the jabs, have now come out and saying that they are doing an investigation into the possibility of a link. They said a signal has triggered. There have been a significant number of strokes happening in people 65 years of age and older who've gotten, I believe, the booster. And so it has triggered an investigation. However, right off the bat, right off the bat, the FDA and CDC are saying that the chances of finding any causational link between the two is very unlikely. That we're very unlikely to find any link between the jabs and this increased rate of strokes among those 65 years of age and older, which is the segment of the population I would submit that is likely to be the most willing to roll up their sleeves for a third, fourth, fifth time, and to keep rolling it up every 3 months, 6 months, or whatever the protocol they decide upon is. And the thing that kills me is the fact that they've stated right up off the bat, before any investigation takes place, they've said the chance of us finding any link is very unlikely. Can you imagine impaneling a jury and having someone up being questioned about being on a jury for a trial, and the individual saying, I find it very unlikely that this individual, that the accused is guilty of the crime he's been accused of, but I think, but I'll go on the jury anyway, and I'll sure, what the heck. But your chance of changing my mind, or I think he's innocent. Can you imagine that person? The prosecuting attorney would automatically invoke one of their, they'd pull them. But yet here we have the FDA and CDC, two organizations heavily pushing the jab, that are, it's, the old analogy of the foxes guarding the hen house. They're not going to find anything. We, on a completely different front, we have the war in Ukraine, and we have Germany now saying that they're going to send Leopard, I believe it's Leopard tanks, to Ukraine to aid them in their war with Russia. And the United States now, as I understand it, is they've committed to sending over Abrams tanks, which is apparently going to take some doing, because there are some technology that the Americans employ that they do not want to include when they send the tanks over. So they're going to have to do some, I guess, retrofitting or something, or adjustments to the equipment before they ship it over to the Ukraine. But Russia has openly stated that this, I don't think they've said it actually equates to a declaration of an overt declaration of war. However, it's close to that. We've known from the beginning that countries like, all the NATO aligned countries, Canada, the US, New Zealand, Australia, Western Europe, they're all on Ukraine's side. But now when you start sending over battle tanks, it's definitely ramping things up. And could that lead to an escalation? And that's something that should concern us. And the last little point I have is, food security. We're coming to the end of January here in Canada. And I think I mentioned this in an earlier video, that back in October of 2022, I always got to check because the years 2020, 2021, 2022, now 2023, they've all kind of blended together in my mind. So I sometimes mislabel years. But in Canada, Loblaws Corporation, the Weston family, which is, I believe it's the number one largest single grocery store chain in Canada. They have the brands Maxi, No Frills, Independent, Loblaws Superstore. They have a number of different stores that are branded under that Loblaws umbrella. They came out in October and they were saying that, in an effort to fight food inflation, that we are going to be freezing the prices on our no-name branded merchandise until January 31st. So anything branded no-name will be frozen until January 31st. Other grocery store chains in Canada then came in, they were in the paper, and they were saying this is industry standard. They were saying Loblaws isn't doing anything unusual. We all freeze prices over the holiday season into the end of January as standard operating procedure, and we're doing it too. But we're coming to the end of that period now. So in 3 days, January 28th now. So in 4 days until February 1. At that point, are we going to see no-name branded merchandise, food products go significantly up in price? They haven't raised prices on them since going back to October anyway. And if they do, I am assuming that they will. If I'm right, if that happens, when it does happen, what will that do to people's grocery bills? Because there's a term in economics called elasticity. It's the degree to which someone will stick with a brand or a product, or switch to another. And having the no-name branded merchandise fixed at a given price serves as something of an anchor in all the branded merchandise out there. If you're buying ketchup, and if the no-name branded bottle is $1, and the branded Heinz or French's or whatever, if the branded version of that product is $2, well, they can't raise it to 3 and 4 because people may like the branded one better. But if the price difference becomes too large, people will switch to the cheaper. Well, yeah, I like my branded ketchup better, but it's not 3 times better than the no name, so I'll switch to the no name. And the degree to which someone will stick with one thing over another is called elasticity. People prefer margarine, or rather they prefer butter to margarine. However, if the price of butter goes too high, people will switch to margarine. And so butter is said to be somewhat elastic. Gas, to use another example, is considered very inelastic, because people have to drive, people have to get to work, people have to get where they're going. So there's a degree of elasticity to gas, because people may restrict their pleasure driving, but they've got nothing else to switch to. It's not like you can run your car off of grape juice. You've got to put gas in the tank. So, and then the whole issue of food security comes into play, because Ukraine, for one, is said to be something of a breadbasket, especially for Eastern Europe, and also, I believe, for the rest of Europe. And it's one of the world's largest producers of grain, wheat products. And if that war escalates as we're heading into planting season, what's that going to do to the world's food supply? We've seen the price of eggs go through the roof. Seems to be hitting different sectors at different times. I think everyone will remember when lumber, getting 2x4s and sheets of plywood and things of that nature, the price went up crazy. And now it's eggs. There have been other sectors, different consumer products have suddenly spiked up and then come down. Lettuce was another one. Lettuce went through the roof and now it's come back down. Are eggs going to come back down? I don't know. But so many things going on in the world right now. And everyone's fixating in on this, salacious little story of this Jordon Trishton Walker guy, whose career is likely over in the pharmaceutical industry and probably any other industry. Might probably have trouble finding a job at a convenience store after this. So I'll leave you with that. Happy Saturday morning, and we'll see what the rest of the week brings. Thanks for watching. You can like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. I do appreciate it, and we will talk to you later. Good night. Good morning.